Have you ever felt like you had a really great potential deal, but you just couldn't figure out the numbers that would make it a good deal for a buyer? In this video, I'm going to take you behind the scenes to one of my private classes for my community where we go over comping. And I don't mean just your basic what are properties that have sold in the area for ARV, do some kind of formula and try to come to a number. No, I mean finding comps where there's hard to comp comps, finding them in areas that don't have a lot of comps, that don't have a lot of distressed comps, and focusing on finding comps that cash buyers paid for properties before a flip or before they fixed it up and rented it out. So you know you're getting the deal at a good price. Now, strap in because this is a long video, but my suggestion is follow step by step. Use your computer, try to follow along step by step. And if you don't have RE Pro List or PropStream, go to reprolist.com. You can get a 2-week free trial and follow along with this video so you can learn how to comp like a pro. We're going to use multiple different websites, free ones, paid ones, so you can really understand the mindset and the process behind finding the right price to get a deal under contract so you'll be confident that you can sell it to a buyer at a higher price and secure your assignment fee. No more just getting deals under contract hoping they'll sell. Do it knowing with the right intention that you can sell that deal once it's locked up. I hope you enjoy, and if you do, leave a comment and share this with someone who needs help learning how to comp.
How to comp hard to comp properties first. So minimize this. And then if you guys have any questions, feel free to hop in while just raise your hand or type it in the chat while we're going, just so we can address it right when your question arises. I'm trying to hide this. Hide loading meeting controls. Let's minimize me. Okay. So everyone has a copy of this. If you don't, it's in the document vault, which is it's in multiple places in the school classroom. One of the places is I got an agreement, now what? And then the other place is in the numbers, comping, and tracking KPIs section. So you'll see the document vault in multiple places. This document is in there. So we are going to use PropStream. We're also going to use Zillow tonight. And then with using Zillow, we also go ahead and use Redfin, Realtor.com, wherever the comps are, we want to look at all of them. So I know a few of you had some properties that were hard comp. So if you don't mind, please put those in the chat because I really want to start with deals you guys are actively working on. If you can open up a Zillow tab and actually click the buttons as I'm clicking them, I'll go nice and slow. If you have PropStream, you can do PropStream too. Just because sometimes it's one thing to watch something, but if you're just watching me, you might rewatch this video 2 or 3 times, but you might miss one small thing that if you follow along, you would have caught it, and then it becomes imprinted in your memory, and you do it every single time. It could be just a simple filter, but it makes the world of a difference as we're trying to comp. So just overview before we actually get into an address, and I'll wait for you guys to drop some addresses, and I'll just go through them one by one, just starting at the very basics, right? You're verifying the bedrooms, bathrooms, and square feet. If you're in a non-disclosure state, you have to get this information from the seller. So if you are in like a marketing method, like let's say you have a cold caller, and your cold caller is giving you addresses, but they're not giving you all the information. It's very important that the cold caller is trained to confirm all of the information. So if they're looking it up on Zillow or PropStream or whatever they're using, and there is no information because it's a non-disclosure state, they need to be able to verify with the owner. I don't see the bed bath on public record. Is it a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom? And it doesn't really matter what it is. They can just say, is it a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom? And the person will correct them. No, it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom. No, it's a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom. This is really important because even if you can't see it for one comp, you may be able to see it for others. As we saw with one of Lisa, who's in the group, one of your deals, Lisa, the other week, it was a 3. We didn't know what it was, but a lot of the comps were 3-1s. And some of the comps, it didn't say what they were. And that's really common. So we really want to know how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, how many square feet. And we have to verify with this with the seller. If your cold caller didn't get it, you can call and get it. Or even better, to train them, say, hey, go ahead and call them back and just verify that information. And it's just as quick as, hey, this is Lisa's assistant. I didn't get all the information when I was on the phone with you. I just needed to confirm one thing. It is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, right? And that's it. It's simple. Okay, she's going to be calling you in the next few hours. She's going to call you tomorrow. You just needed to verify that so she could run the numbers properly. It's really that simple, but you need all the information. Other information that you might be able to see from Street View, but that you'd also need is, does it have a garage? Is it a 2-story house, a 1-story house? Is it brick? Is it siding? Because all of these things are going to come into play when you're comping. Sometimes you can't tell if it has a pool or not from Street View, but you can from bird's eye view. So it's really important to look the house up before you make an offer and look at what it looks like from the outside. For example, I don't know if we'd be able to see from here, but when we look at these houses in this neighborhood, you can see that these have pools, right? So that's a pretty easy way to verify, because there is a few houses with pools in the neighborhood, but if you're trying to comp this one and you see this one sold for a high price, it's not a comp because pools add a lot of value. Looking at Street View, super important. This is a stucco house with shingle roof. You can look at the year built, and then you can always look at the Google date. March 2025 is when the Google camera came. So 9 times out of 10, this property is still in the same condition. As you drive, you can see there is new development right here. So if you're looking at one of these houses, you can't comp that with one of these. But if you're looking at these, you can't comp it with one of these because they're different years built. So it's just very important to look at all those things. And the best way to do it is going into Street View, going into bird's eye view, before you even get deep into PropStream and Zillow, just confirming what exactly the specs of your subject property is. So when we talked about cash comps in the classroom, when I talk about comping, this is something you do when you're on the phone with the seller right then and there, just to see if the price they're asking is wild or if it's within a ballpark range. So I know sometimes it's like in the videos you say go into PropStream, look at public record, sales situation, cash buyer. But a lot of times there's not going to be anything there if the price point's too high for people to be buying cash or if the comps are just old. So this is just something that is best in smaller markets where there is those 50, 60, $70,000 properties, because a lot of people are buying those cash, like Kansas City or Cleveland or a lot of these other places. That is a good place to look at cash comps, but it's not going to work everywhere, and it's not your final comping. That's just what you do while you're on the phone. And I'm going to do that next, but first we're going to start with like hard to comp comps. So this is a good one. And then Lisa, I know you said you had a few too, so if you don't mind dropping those addresses in the chat so we can comp those as well. And then, like we talked about, 6 months, 90 days if you can. If not, you can go further out. It's better to go further out in time than it is to go too far in mileage. And the area that you can go out, this goes a little bit with knowing your market. Because, for example, with Las Vegas, if you go more than a half a mile out, you're going to be fine here. You could probably go 2, 3 miles out and you will still have a consistency because of the zip code, the types of schools that there are around there. But let's say in Cleveland, you could be less than a half a mile out and you're already too far out because the neighborhoods are so pocketed. So part of it is knowing your market. If you don't know your market well enough, driving the streets on Google Earth helps a lot because you'll be able to see from neighborhood to neighborhood how different they look. And then if not, worst case, stay within the 0.5 miles. If you're in a really tiny rural town, it's very hard to stay in 0.5 miles because there's probably not a lot of sales in the whole town at all. So in those situations, looking at all the comps, looking at Street View, and then trying to talk to people in that market to determine, is this area and this area similar or is it too different? And you could do that with the same strategy. Let's say you're not talking to people on Facebook, you're not talking to people. The simplest way is the same way we look for boots on the ground, going to a Craigslist, labor gigs, saying you want pictures of a house, and then just having a conversation with the people that put their phone numbers, say, hey, I'm trying to figure out when I can get pictures of this house. I asked a few people if they could go, would you be open to go? I was looking at this house and I noticed there was another house that sold over here. Are those neighborhoods similar? Same thing, because people who live there are going to be the only people who can tell you that, and you can get that information from your boots on the ground. You don't necessarily have to find wholesalers or agents or buyers to get you that information. You can get that information in those small towns from boots on the ground. I just want to reiterate that because it's so important. If you are in a town that you don't understand yet, if you're in a market that you don't know, or like what I do with the nationwide virtual, where we're getting deals all the time in markets that we don't know at all, we either will ask the seller while we're talking to the seller, hey, I noticed another property in, let's say the neighborhood's called Ridgewood. I noticed another property in Ridgewood that sold. How does that compare to your street? And they'll tell you. You can post that Craigslist labor gigs to look for your boots on the ground for photos. Ask the boots on the ground. Hey, I noticed another property sold that was similar in Ridgewood, but I noticed it's a little far. It's like a mile or two up the street. How does that compare to this neighborhood? Crime wise, how good are the schools? Do people want to live there? Is it more renters or is it more homeowners? These are things you need to know, because if you don't, you could be comping improperly. If they say, oh no, they're exactly the same, everywhere around here is pretty much the same, then you know you can be more than half a mile out. And that's important to know, because you're not going to be able to tell these things just from looking. These are more internal factors. But that's just if you don't have things within a half a mile, because that's you're not always going to have things within a half a mile, especially when you're doing nationwide virtual and you're getting these small markets with 30,000, 20,000 people in the whole town. It's going to be very hard to find a lot of recent comps. 10 years is good for timeline. Two car garage, three-car garage, like you want to make sure it's the same number of cars in the garage. Same beds and baths if you're able to. If there's not, then you can also do a price per square foot type of thing, which we'll talk about later. And then looking at ARV comps, looking at cash as is comps. That's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at both. So we're going to dive into the first comp. We're going to follow this criteria. And I want you guys to do this too, if you can. Open up your prop stream, open up your Zillow, and click along so you can actually learn by doing. So every time you get a property, you can follow the process, whether it's hard to comp or not, and figure out what properties are actually worth in that area. And then we're just going to have a doc to take notes on, so that as you're finding addresses, as you're seeing different things, you're able to take notes, because you'll easily forget all of this stuff. So start with the first property, 1360 Hart Street. I don't know why it's doing that. 32209. Okay, so Jacksonville, Florida. So this is on market. So we get a lot of pictures with this one. The exterior looks like it could use some work. A lot of work. So this is pretty much a full rehab. I mean, there's no way anybody could move into this. I don't know why they did virtual staging. This weird, honestly. So we're going to start here. I'm going to read the description really quickly. Built in 1929, 4/3/2163. So just getting my property specs down. Okay, not really too much information. And then down at the bottom of Zillow, there's usually going to be some comparables. We want to kind of see what it sold last for. It's not really that big of a deal, but they listed it in 2022 for 160. It couldn't sell. They listed it again, and they bought it for somewhere around 50K. So, okay, so down here, we will see some solds, and we're going to look at this in another way in a little bit as well. We can see the school zone rating, which is important. And then we'll see some solds here. 73,000, a 1-1, which is not a comp. There's some for rents, 850 and 1,000. So that kind of tells us nearby the rent rates are pretty low. So we can just go back to our little map here. And since the subject property is right here, we want to look at the yellows on Zillow are for sale, yellows are sold, red is for sale, and then purple's for rent. So we'll look at some of these that sold. So that's not really a comp because it's smaller, a lot smaller. Another way you can do it is, my internet is going so slow. I'm gonna grab this thing. Okay. Okay. 8,000. So another way that I like to do this, just to make it easier so I don't have to like click on every single thing, is I look at the map and I look at where the house is. So there's this Kings Road, and then there's this 95 highway, and this is the 32209 zip code. So then all I really have to do is be in this area, change my, so if you guys are doing this, follow along with me. In Zillow, you're either in 32209 zip code or you're in Jacksonville. So let's go 3209. And what we're going to try to do is just narrow down that area that we just saw. So that's the 95. This is the 20 Expressway. That's the 95. That says Kings Road, but that might be that same expressway. So if I zoom out a little bit, I'll see it. Kings Road, Beaver Street. So we're right here. So I'm going to try to find that same area right there, which is right around here. So Moncrief Park is what it looks like. Midwest side is what it says here. 95. Kings Road, Newtown. Okay. Kings Road. Okay, here we go. 95 Kings Road. So this is our general area. I think this is the property here. 1360 Hart Street. So we're really, really close right here along Kings Road. So then we'll switch this to sold. No minimum, no maximum. We don't want to put any bedrooms and bathrooms just yet. And then we just want to make sure it's houses. And then our year built, take off 2020. So there's a lot of new builds around here. I want to say it was 1923. So 1963. Okay. So we don't want anything older than 1990. Let's just try to give it some. So 1990, there's a lot. So let's do 1980. And then, since we know this is a bigger house, 2,000 square feet.
Sorry to interrupt, Toddy. What did you have? 1963? Was that the year built?
Yeah, 1963.
I think they had the year built as 29, like it's an older home.
1929?
I think so.
Let's see. Oh, yeah, 1929. Good catch. So, dang. All right. So, then we'll change this to, let's change it to 1950. And that's good because that reduces it. And then square feet, let's go for 1750 minimum, just so we can get stuff. So now we really narrowed down. Another filter you can add, which I'm not going to add just yet because I kind of want to click around first, sold in last, you can put 90 days, which we can do it to see how it reduces it, but usually it takes away too many comps, especially for ones that are this age. And then when you guys saw when the filter said 2020 and up, how many there was, that says there's a lot of new construction in this area. So there's two ways to look at it. This could be a new construction deal where someone tears this property down. It's so old that really someone should just tear it down and build something new. So that's the other strategy that we'll look at now that we saw that there's 2020 plus builds, right? We don't want to just keep our mindset on one exit strategy when we look at the property, because we want to present all the opportunities to the seller so they can, number one, kind of get back to reality on their pricing. They want 180 for this, which is probably too much. And then number two, we want them to know like what all their options are, because this property looks really nice and it's sold 200,000. So that's crazy. So this is a 6'3", 2,000 square feet. And this is where we can use both PropStream and Zillow, because here we don't have any pictures for this house. Whenever I do Zoom at the same time as trying to show stuff, it just goes so slow.
I
So
think that's the only comp I was able to find. I'm almost sure because
come
that
on.
price point was 170, so I believe that was the only comp I was able to find for this property.
What were you saying?
I believe that was the only comp I was able to find because I remember that price, 170, because I was having trouble finding anything in that same square footage. But that's the one property I was able to find that was in that ballpark square footage.
I'm sorry, my internet is so bad right now. It's not, I didn't really hear you, but I did hear you say this is the only property you found that was ballpark in the same square footage.
Yeah.
Let me, my computer is tripping right now. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can close some of my other windows that I have open. Mm, wow. Give me 1 second, guys. This is not. I have another window with like a bunch of Chat GPT and Claude and stuff open, so that I'm just gonna close everything as it lets me and see if that helps this. Right now, it's just doing that little Apple scroll. This is crazy. Sorry, guys. 1 second or a minute. Um, I'm gonna look up how to force quit. I forgot. Option, command, and escape. Okay. Okay, I think that's gonna work now. I was able to quit that. Let me just close all my apps. That was crazy. That's literally never happened. I think this computer is just too old at this point. Okay, let me try this again. Oh no, don't open that. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're working again. Okay, here we go. So I'm trying to use PropStream and see if we can find comps to this property. So, okay, good. So there's pictures here. So yeah, this is in a lot better shape than that other one. They probably did use this to anchor their price, but inside and out, this is like a totally different type of deal. Exterior and interior, this house is it's moving ready. It's not updated, but it is moving ready at least. So then the thing with this one is the age. It's so old.
Right.
It's in such bad shape. And the good thing about deals like this is like you can tell sellers like, hey, this is, this house that sold for 170 is way better than yours, just to be
Right.
frank. And then tell them about properties that are more like theirs, like this one looks way more like the shape of theirs, and this sold for 70. So they're like 100K off in price. And sometimes people don't want to hear that, but that's the reality. This one kind of looks like a multifamily, but built in 1916. This is a very similar house to theirs. It's a little older, but condition wise, it's similar. So we've got 70K there. And if we did, like going back to talking about cash comps, if I'm on the phone with a seller and I just want to quickly figure out what's their property worth, I know the bed's bath square footage and I know the property type is single family. So all I have to do is put in single family, and then I can try to look if anybody bought anything cash. And let's say I even put it out a mile. So we see 65, 60, 73, and 85. 1800 is probably a rent comp. But this gives us a good idea. And then we've got this 120 that we can look at and automatically can see the outside is new. That might be a investment property someone bought cash, but they bought it renovated. This looks exactly like the subject property. As far as like the condition it's in, like it's not disgusting, but it's dated and it needs a full rehab. And the exterior is even better on this one, but that one sold for 88.5. So even on a low end, high end kind of thing, you would probably want to be between 70 and 80 at the most to potentially be able to sell it to an investor for around that 85, 90. And you can kind of see here with the chain of title, someone got it in 2023 for 70,000 and sold it a year and a half later for 88,000. So that's really good to see this. And this just confirms. So I would be like, if this was my deal and I'm getting information to talk to the seller, I would be putting down, I'll put this one down and put my notes on it. So I would say sold for 170 in rent ready shape inside and out. And then I'll go to my next comp, which was this one, 1204 growth, and this sold for 77. And when I tell 70s, apples to apples, a little older, and then when I talk to the seller, I'm going back with this information or the agent or whoever. At the end of the day, there's even this one. We can't see the pictures on PropStream, but we can also throw that in Zillow. So there is comps. There's just not comps to justify the price they wanted. And this looks like they're doing a full renovation, or they just built a house on the same foundation. So this one's actually interesting. And let's look at this one a little bit closer. And this is the cool thing, because when you do this, you're able to see more than what you can see on Zillow. So 65,000 in 2025. Let's look at the street view. Because the last thing that I want to do is look at what would this mean for a new construction comp, because that looks like what they might be doing here is just building a new house. Which would be great because they bought it for 65,000 and they're building a new house. That means you could potentially get this property and sell it to a builder. So we're back in our little subject area, which is around here. Now we're looking at no minimum, no maximum, because now it's not going to matter, because now we're going to be basically looking at land. We want to look at 2020 and newer builds in this area and see what those sell for. 225, 210, 215, 185 even. And obviously these are smaller than the subject property, but we can kind of also look and see if this tiny piece of land is what they're building on. Potentially, depending on the size of your lot, maybe you could build two of these and they rent for 1850 and they sold for 210. It's not a bad thing. It's just maybe they need to look at different strategies for how they're going to sell their property. So this lot is a 3,400 square foot lot. And then $3,400 square foot lot, yours is the same. So realistically, they're only going to be able to build that. They're basically trying to sell this for what someone could buy a new house for. And that's the problem.
Right,
They're
right.
like very off, but they are using an agent. So the agent does know this. I don't know why the agent would steer them, this hard in the wrong direction. Maybe it's a newer agent. Maybe they don't understand.
No, the seller has 100% equity.
Yeah, but why would they be trying to sell it this high? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
They're never going to sell it unless they just don't care. But yeah, I think as a full rehab, if I was you, I would want to be at like 65 or 70 at the most, maybe to try to sell it for 80. But realistically, this should be torn down and rebuilt. It's already in really bad shape. Yeah, it's already in really bad shape. It's old. That house needs to be torn down and rebuilt.
Right.
Kind of gives you, I'm glad you didn't get under contract, because I think that's part of like what's going on these days is like a lot of people are just like getting things under contract for the sake of getting them under contract, but really you're wasting your own time and money, because this is time you could be using to get a deal you can actually sell.
Right.
And it just leads people into the cycle of feeling like wholesaling doesn't work, or like, just leaves you feeling very confused. And it's because a lot of sellers are very unrealistic. And this is like the times and places that this whole cash comp method works really well. If I go in here and I look for cash, what are things selling for while I'm on the phone, or when I just look at the lead and I see 60s and 70s and this person's at 180, it's like, okay, we're definitely not going to be a good fit. I'm going to start off like that. Like, hey, I'm sure we're not a good fit because the price you have it listed at is the price of new construction in the area and it doesn't make sense. So can you tell me, kind of like your mindset behind this. Are you not really needing to sell? And you can just start it off like that. Like, are you not really needing to sell? And they'll say, yeah, I don't really care. I just want to see how much someone will pay for this. Okay, then I'm not going to be the right buyer because I'm never going to be the highest. I'm an investor, but I will be the person that will close for sure if the numbers make sense for me. I will be the person that can do it quickly if the numbers make sense for me. And that's kind of where working with me is an advantage to you. I'm not going to be like the person that wants to fix this house and move into it, and then you can just end the conversation there. When it comes to teardown, would the comp change to the value of the lot? Well, if the lot could, like, let's say this was like a 10,000 square foot lot and two of these properties could be built, the idea would be that a builder could subdivide the land. So if somebody paid 65 for one lot, they may be willing to pay 95 for two. It won't necessarily be double because to subdivide, get plans and all that, get permits approved to make it two lots would cost, and then you have to like kind of account for that. But typically with land, people will pay between 10 to 20% of the total build value. So we saw that a new build could sell for 210. So when you double that, that's like 420. So someone would possibly pay between 42 and 84,000 around there. Sometimes like let's say 90, maybe a little bit more to be able to build. But they also would have to tear that property down and clear it, which is like 10K. So just depending on what they can build. Since they can only build this one lot, I'm going to base it off of what properties that got torn down and sold for new sold for, which is literally the same thing. Okay, this is the cool part about using that little Zillow map and triangulating the area. This is really the only way you can do something like this is by, and I'm going to repeat this because I want you guys to really get used to this. You look at the map and you figure out where is this property. It's 95 and Kings Road. This is the only way to really do it. Then you go into Zillow and you can go into your zip code 32209. This is like so simple. And then you go back and you find that little area. And then it was down here. So Kings Road. And we want to stick in with that little area because we know when we cross highways, we get into different neighborhoods. So we're sticking in this little area right here. And then let's see if our new build filter is still on, 2020. And when we look at these properties, because we can also switch this to land, when we look at these lots, we can also see what lots are selling for in the area. So going back to, let's say this one, because this is a very skinny house that they built. It's a 3.2, 1145. We can go into our prop stream or whatever. Usually when it's a new build, Zillow's not going to have the previous information, but usually prop stream will in mortgage and transaction history. No, so they built this in 2023 and they had that $175,000 loan, so that's not a good one. We see a 20K. I'm trying to see 270. So this looks like a flip. And we can look at this one a little more. This is a duplex. And when we use PropStream, we can usually see what they sold before when they needed the work, like whether it's a new build or whether it's a rehab. So when we go to mortgage and transaction history, we see somebody bought this property for 105. Obviously they renovated it and they sold it for 269. So if we have something similar to this, that was, let's say this property was a duplex and not a single family, potentially they could sell it for around 100K because this is a 1914 build, similar size lot. So potentially this cash comp will tell you, hey, someone would buy this for around 100K, renovate it, and they could potentially sell it for around 270 if it was a duplex, but it's not a duplex. And we can keep doing this with, I want to find a new construction one and do it because you can also do it like that. So this was built in 2022. A lot of times in PropStream, it'll tell you what land sold for before it got built on. And that's another way to do it if you don't want to do the 20-40% rule. So they bought this from the tax sale of the county. So this doesn't really count, but still, they bought it for $7,000 from the county. They built a house and they sold it for $200,000. So that's really good. They got a good deal on this. Not necessarily, it's not always going to be like that. So there's two sides. Like, yes, some people might pay 10 to 20%, But on the flip side, if they could also get land for 10K, they're not going to pay that 40 grand. So it just really just because it's also comps. You know, if there's land, like let's say for sale, and we go to lots for sale, and you can see there's a lot for sale for 13,000, no one's going to buy a lot for 40,000 in a neighborhood where you could buy a lot for 13. So you
Right.
still need to look at, you know, what things are selling for on the market. But for this particular house, it's just like it's pretty clear that it needs to be at like 60, 70K. And then maybe you could sell it for 80, maybe for 90 on the high end. Some could put 80,000 into it and keep it as a rental. But I think that would work better if it was a duplex, with it being a single family. And this is another one that's really similar to yours, just like, but it's much nicer on the inside. So it's actually still really ugly, but it is nicer, but it's also ugly. And this one
Mm.
probably will sit on the market for a long time too, because they're out of their mind. One last thing. This person is free and clear. They might be willing to do a creative deal where, hey, we can't give you 180, but maybe we can give you 100 or 110, which is more than they'll get from the 60, 70K lowballers. And I'm sure if they've gotten any offers, they've been very low. They probably haven't got offers because it's up so high. Have
Mhm.
they told you if they've got offers or not?
Say that again.
Did they tell you whether they got offers or not?
The agent did say they have other offers.
Did they tell you like the prices?
No.
Well, yours was clearly the best because they're trying to send you.
Right.
I would say, you know, the other offers were probably really low. And I would say, like, look, the property's not there. After looking at other comps, we can see that this property needs way more work, interior and exterior. And things like this are selling for like 65, 70, at the most, maybe 80. We could give you a little more if you do something creative, like maybe they sell it for 100K with 10K down. And after 6 months, once it's renovated, we start some kind of monthly payments. And then after 5 years, once interest rates are better, we can refinance and then give you the full balloon payment, the remainder of the 90,000. Something like that. Maybe you could sell or finance to someone for $15,000, $20,000 down and make your assignment fee like that and give it to someone who doesn't want to get financing with the bank because interest rates are high, but they have the cash to rehab. You know, something like that could possibly work. I don't really like doing creative deals on things that need this much rehab because that means every penny the investor spends has to either be out of pocket or they have to get private money, which is like a 12% loan. So it still has to make sense numbers wise, which it may not, but it could be worth throwing out there like, hey, would they be open to some type of seller finance deal where they get, you know, 10K and some sort of monthly payment after a few months once it's renovated? And that could always be your last ditch effort to try to convert on market deals. Personally, I don't like doing on market deals at all because unless I'm going to be able to get this for 60 or 70, my buyers are going to go on market and see that it's on there. And if I only have a small discount, psychologically, they just don't think it's a deal. Especially in times like right now where it's a buyer's market and you can go online and look on what's for sale and find a property for 70K or 60K or 80K. You can find something for 99 and call it and negotiate it down because there's not a lot of buyers or investors right now in the market. So
Right.
I do like on market for that reason, unless I'm going to do on market and convert it to creative. And just make sure you point out that there's new construction selling for 180. You know, that's what makes this deal so crazy.
Right. And so what you did for prop stream, you just pretty much looked at the cash comps, like what cash buyers paid in the last year.
Yep, I just looked at cash
Okay.
buyer. Um, and then even without the cash buyer, I looked at all the sales, but I also just tried to look at pictures and see what, you know, condition they're in. Because this wasn't a cash sale, but it's an apples to apples, but this one's very nice. And that's why I sold for 170. Just trying to look at what sold, what's the condition of it, and you know, why is this one not going to sell? This is another one for 200. That's also an older house, but it's very, very nice. So that's something you could do. I went a long way around by starting with Zillow, looking at the area, but you could have just did this by just going straight to PropStream. But I wanted to do the Zillow way first because in any case, if a deal is hard to comp, this is the way you're going to figure out what the comps are. Because if you don't put this 90 days filter on, Zillow is just going to show you all the sales. And then you can start narrowing down bedroom, bathroom, home type, and then put it on sold. And whether it's the hardest deal to comp, you'll see if there's any sales at all. So that's why I kind of like to do this strategy of, this is like my hard to comps method of, like, I'm looking at the map, I'm figuring out where it is, and I'm just going to the area in Zillow and I'm looking around the entire area. Like this one, I would stay on this side. So we'll do this one next, but this is just the easiest way to comp things that are just like, when you feel frustrated, you're like, I have no idea what this comp is or how to comp this. This won't fail you. This is like the last ditch method. But that property in particular, we could have just looked at on it on PropStream. And then this one, I will also start a PropStream search because I know I had a technical malfunction that killed a lot of our time. So I want to make sure we get to all the comps. So this is a 2-1, 1230, 1940 year built. So this is a small house. Cool. And then this is 1809 East Orange Street. So we are here in Little Rock. So we've got our freeway thing, and then we're gonna go to the left of that. Okay, that's a big zip code. So that's not typical. That zip code is like half the city. So we're in this little 630 and 30, and then we're on the left side of this. So let's see if there's, okay. So we're somewhere in this area, and I'm gonna get a little bit closer. Where'd you go, house? Okay, it's right here. So between Broadway and Chester. And I think this is Broadway and Chester. Okay, so we're somewhere in here. And then this is a 2-1. So we'll do 2 and we'll use exact match. And we'll do let's do 1. So 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, and then we're on for sale right now. Let's also match the year built, 1940. Kind of just want to look at these real quick. That's cute. Okay, I like this comp. This looks like a good comp, even though these are 2 2s. So let's go sold. So 2-1, okay. And then I just want to see what this house looks like from the outside. This is really bad. Okay. Okay. Across the street from commercial. But is this vacant, Lisa?
Yes, it is.
It looks vacant. Yeah, it looks like it's totally falling apart.
And in fact, he sent me pictures inside. It looks like they tried to do work and then they just ran out of money. So it's not even livable.
Yeah, you can, if you look at it right here, you see how this is all like sagging? And then you can see right here, the brick, this is the foundation. So there's definitely foundation issues with this house. Definitely needs a new roof, gutters, porch, literally everything. The good thing is it's a small house, but it needs a lot of work. And this is a good deal because those are the best kind of deals that need a crazy amount of work if they're willing to come to terms. So they tried to list it in 2021 for $15,000. And it stayed on the market for 3 years? No, 2 years. So this is crazy. This is like a teardown. So, oh gosh, that sucks. I mean, this sold for 135 and it's like much better. Let's see. Okay, I can't see the year built on this, but this looks like new construction. I think this is going to be a land deal. So now we're here in this little section. I'm going to switch because look at this. This is a 2-1 in much better shape, and this sold for 79. It needed some work on the outside, but this was a rehab. This was a rehab house, but definitely wasn't as bad as that one. And that sold for 79. And let's just see, for the sake of this, if there is some new construction comps. So 225, let's take off exact match. 270. So this is definitely something that it could be if it got torn down. This was built in 2023 and it was 270. I don't see why, if that guy was willing to sell it for 15,000, it didn't sell. You'd think somebody would have did that and turned it into a new house. Did they say what they want for the house?
Yes. And I have a buyer, but now I'm trying to track the guy. Now we're paying we're playing phone tag. So I thought I did a comp, and maybe I got a comp at 1516 South Spring Street for 142, but I'm still learning. Yeah,
So what price was your buyer at? They saw the pictures and everything?
I told him I'll give him 25,000 for him.
The seller.
Yes.
And then the buyer would buy that. Your buyer agreed to like 35 or anything over that?
Okay, so this is the deal. This is the comp, the 142.
Like an ARV comp?
Yes.
This is not ARV. I mean, this house still needs work.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I mean, if your buyer will buy it.
So yeah, they said they would. They said, "Oh, it's a good deal," because at first he wanted 33 for it, and my buyer was like 25. So I've been back and forth with this guy. He sent me pictures and everything, and I left him another message. And he said he lives like in Atlanta somewhere. He says I'll be there this weekend, and I've been leaving messages, get in contact with him.
So your buyer wants it at 25.
He wanted 33. I said 25. But doing the ARV, I'm just a little confused with that equation because I want to make sure with doing the ARV and then with the amount that we would have to take, off from the price for renovation.
Right.
And I'm still a little confused. I watched your video on that, but the ARV, now I hear we use like 0.75, but now I hear it's now 0.6. I'm a little, I want to.
I wouldn't get into, that's only if there's no comps. If you can't find comps and you have to figure out some number, really your buyer, there's different buyers. Like there's some buyers who are going to go in there with their cousins and fix it themselves. Like for them, they're going to be able to buy it at a higher price because let's say for a house like this that's 1,400 square feet, a rehab could be 60,000, it could be 80,000, or it could be 30,000 if all you're paying for is materials. So I would let your buyer determine how much they think it's going to cost. Because all you do when you tell them how much it's going to cost, you're either A, going to underbid it and they're going to tell you, oh no, I can't pay that because I still would have to do this, or this. You have a lot of comps here. I would go off of the comps and what people bought distressed houses for, and then what they were able to sell them for after. Because you have a lot of comps here. This is not like a deal where you don't have a lot of comps. It's in the situation where you don't have comps, where you're trying to like reverse engineer the amount of work. And then when you have to do that, we have that chart. I wouldn't do like a percentage. The percentages, 0.7, 0.8%, that's going to be in nicer neighborhoods, more appreciating neighborhoods with good school zones that are going to go up over time quickly. But like cheap rental grade neighborhoods that don't have great schools, they're not going to appreciate as fast. And there's more risk involved with those types of investments because the type of tenants you have mess up the house. When you change tenants, you have to fix things again. So because of that, you can't really do a 0.7, 0.8. Where that 0.7 formula comes from is when you go to get a hard money loan, they're usually only going to lend you 70% or 80% or maybe even 65% of your purchase and rehab. And you're going to have to bring the rest of the money to the table. So when they're able to get the property at a lower percentage, they're covering more of their flip with that loan. That's where that formula comes from. And the formula is geared to let the investor do the deal without having much money out of pocket. But that doesn't matter for everyone. Like some people are just going to buy for 35 cash. The interest rate's not going to matter. They're not going to need a loan. So I would hard stay away from the rules because every market you go to, there's going to be a different rule. In Vegas, it could be 85% because people want houses so bad. In Little Rock, it could be 60% because maybe there's a lot of deals. Maybe there's a lot of distressed houses. In Cleveland, it's definitely more of a 60% because there's so many distressed properties. Am I able to like just go look and get a better deal than the one you're giving me? That's like a better rule of thumb than like this hard percentage. But if you want to try to reverse engineer repair costs, this is something you could do. Anything like the property you're showing that is a full rehab, I would do heavy and I would just add another 10,000 because you have foundation issues plus roof issues. Yours is like the worst case. But again, this number is for somebody who's like hiring contractors. That's where you kind of have to talk to your buyer and figure out how do they buy, because you have people who buy in different ways. Some people don't hire contractors. They're doing the work themselves, or they have one crew that works on multiple houses for them. So that 60,000 could easily become 40,000. And in a deal you could have made 10K, now you've made nothing because you overestimated what they would have to do. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
I would ask them, these are the pictures, how much do you think a rehab would cost you? And let them tell you.
Okay, so I guess maybe I didn't ask the question correctly. Is that I want to make sure if I can get it for that price, it's going to work out for me. Meaning when I do maximum allowable offer.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No. I get what you're saying. Like if you offer him, like, for example, 30, are you going to be able to sell it for more?
Because I was using this equation, this calculator to put the comparables in, what the rehab would be, what my assignment would be, and it calculated everything so I could see what the maximum allowable offer is to make sure that I am getting an ARV, and when I get my assignment fee, that it works out, and not to find out later that, I'm not going to make any money off of this, to be kind of like, this is my maximum allowable offer that I'm going to offer you and what I'm going to make, and the rehabs according to the guidelines that the buyer is going to have to put into it to make sure the numbers work, that it's a good deal.
I don't know Little Rock, right? But from what I'm seeing, your property is on this side of the highway. The one you're using as a comp is on this side of the highway, this 70 highway. I don't know if that matters to Little Rock, right? Because this comp you're using that sold for 140 that still needed work is right by a main street. This may be more of like a nicer area, but I don't know. That would be like your market knowledge to say, hey, is this a better area than over here? Because they are different areas. But besides that, your 4-1, this house is in a lot better shape than the other one, but this also still needs work. So this is kind of like an as is comp. But I think because I'll just open another window in PropStream and look at this one separately. When we look at the comps for this one, it should be pretty clear on if the neighborhoods are similar or not. And this was also, let me just make sure. This was also a 1886 build. That's very old. And yours is a 1940. So two things. 1846 is very old. I would check and see if it's not a historic home, because it may be a historic home, which would make the value a lot more. And then like just looking at the neighborhood, like look at this house. I have a lot of experience with this because of Cleveland. There's a lot of historic homes in Cleveland. And while it might look like they're similar houses, they're really not, because historic homes, you have to keep them looking the same over time. So even when you renovate a house like this, you can't change the original flooring. You can't change the brick down here. Like you can paint it, but they may have specific colors that you're allowed to paint it. So renovating it is a lot different, but they're also worth a lot more because they are historic homes and then they have like a tax credit. But I don't know. I'm just looking at strictly comps. So there is a really high comp, and this is a comp for yours, 1809 South Izzard for 283. But to me, this looks like new construction. I don't know why the date is not showing up. So let's not look at that one. Let's look at this one, 135. And this is kind of like that Spring Street one. It's in better shape, but it's not like all new. I don't think these two are necessarily comps, but I do think these aren't ARV comps because they're just not renovated. Which makes me think like renovated, you could get more. This one, so let's do the cash. Let's try cash comps. So let's go cash buyer and let's look at what people are buying cash. And this is right by your property. So this house is very junky. It's brick. It has a 1-car garage. But this also kind of looks like a full rehab. The only thing with yours is the fact that it definitely has foundation issues. But it's a small house, so it may not be very expensive. But someone did buy this for $65,000. So that's like good news. And then you don't really have much more. You got like 5,000. So let's look at these very, very cheap ones. 47,000. This kind of looks, it's bigger than 3-1. It's a little bit bigger, has a bigger lot, but this looks very distressed. Very, very distressed. And you said they tried to start doing some work on the inside of yours, so yours might look a little bit better than this, probably, right?
Oh, no, actually it's in the same condition. It looks like they started doing work, but they ran out of money, so nothing was actually completed. There's like the doors are, so this one is a little better, that better condition.
Okay, well, this one sold for 47,000. So I feel like you're in the ballpark. And let's look at this 39,000. I really feel like you're in the ballpark because when you look at these really messed up houses, you've got 39, you've got 47. The guy tried to sell it for 15,000 for 2 years. So the fact that you're offering him 25, I don't see why he wouldn't take that unless he's talking to other people, but I do think that he probably would take that. I think you could probably sell it. You could probably sell it, maybe depending on how much the foundation would be, for around 40. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to sell it for around 40,000.
Okay, so purchase it from him for 25 and sell it for 40.
Yeah, put it out for 40 and see if you'll get that, get that number. But I think getting it at 25 is a safe bet.
Yes, he said he
You
will.
might,
He said he will sell it for 25.
yeah, I would lock that up and I would try to sell it for 40 because you do have this comp that sold for 47. And the cool thing is you see right here who bought it, Mid-South Home Buyers. And while you're doing your research, this is stuff, you should be putting into your sheet because Mid-South Home Buyers is probably your buyer. So you've got Mid-South Home Buyers LLC, and then you've got the other comp for 47, I think it was. And I would just look at that one, and then you've got this one for 65. I would look at this one, and I would reach out because who's buying these really messed up houses? Other investors. So I'd reach out to Velma Owens. I would reach out to all three of these people who bought these distressed properties in the area. It was this one, 47,250. Let's see who that buyer was. And then soon you'll see what they're selling these for. Home Ownership Matters, LLC. They'll buy it from you and do a fix and flip on it. So you've got 3 potential buyers right there once you lock this up, plus, however many more, because we still have this comp at 1516. You can hit cash buyer for this. That won't count because that's only 3,000. That's probably land. But we can go down this row. And I do think this is probably historic home, but we can see who bought this one for 70 and also reach out to them. So I think that your number is a good number. Delta Services Group of Arkansas. So this is another property that potentially is getting flipped right now. So yeah, you've got plenty of buyers in the area that would probably buy it around 40.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I don't know. I guess I was thinking wrong. Okay. So I was thinking the ARV and then what the buyer purchase it for minus the renovation. So I know you said each market is different. So this market, it would pretty much be the lower
Each
price.
market is very different. So
Yeah.
it's pretty much always it's always if you have apples to apples comps that have sold. So you have a very distressed property. If you have other very distressed properties that are similar beds and baths that have sold, that's your ballpark range. You can try to get a little more. Like, let's say you put it out for 50, but at the end of the day, yours is actually in worse shape than these ones because yours has foundation issues. We don't know if the other ones did, but from the exterior, it doesn't look like it. But you can always put it out for whatever number you want. But it's in that scenario, it's going to be up to you to kind of hound the buyers to figure out why they don't want it when they are kind of like silent. Because let's say you put it out for 60,000 or 50,000 and no one is responding to you. You're going to then talk to people, realize it's too high, and then have to remarket it at a number. But if you see, there's 34, there's 47, but it's a little bit bigger and it's a little bit better. These ones don't look like they have foundation issues. Let's come up with something kind of median that we feel like we could sell it for, get it for 25, put it out there for 40. Let's say you have multiple people who really want it at 40. You can tell them, hey, I have someone who's offering 40. What's the best you can do? Because they really want it and they've told me that they're gonna offer more. And now you can kind of do a bidding war and get a little more. But that's honestly unlikely because your property is very small and it has foundation issues in the brick, which requires like jacking the house up and then fixing that. And it needs a roof and everything's falling apart. Your property's in worse condition than these other ones. So bad that he tried to sell it for 15,000 for 2 years. So that's another question mark that we don't know why. Like, why was it listed for 2 years at 15,000 and nobody wanted it? There may be termite damage. There may be something going on there beyond what we can see in pictures, which is what you'll find out when you have buyers going through and doing due diligence. But the first step you can really do is get it under contract, talk to the buyers, send them out there, let them look at it, and then give you feedback. If somebody wants that 40, great. You said somebody already said 33. They may be lowballing. You may be able to get 40, but in the chance that you don't, that's still an $8,000 deal. And did that person go look at it?
So no, so a community that I'm in a group, they actually looked at it and said, if you can get in contact, that I'll go ahead and purchase it. I said, okay. So the guy, we went back and forth. He actually sent pictures, the inside, and he said he wanted 25. But now that you say it's 15, now you have me wondering if it was sitting that long, that even 25, he wanted 33. The seller wanted 33, not my potential buyer. So that's something I would like to ask and dig deeper. Because 25 may be offering too much, especially with the market, and it sat there for a couple years. So now it has me thinking that could be an option to ask that question and get it under for 15 or 16,000. It looks like he
So
ran.
what happened?
No, I don't know what happened.
Are you talking to Jarrell?
Yes.
Okay, so he bought it. He's the one who bought it. So it was
Yes.
listed.
So what happened is when my VA gave me a lead, the lead that I talked to gave me this lead because it's a family member that actually took it over. And he said, call him, and he gave his information. I called, I spoke with him. We kind of played phone tag. He had pictures. He sent pictures so I could preview. He left me a message. I called him back. He said, I'll be willing to sell it for 25. Give me 25. I left him a message. So we're doing the phone tag thing. But that is something I would like to ask. You
So
try.
like he got it in 2019 for 10,000 and immediately listed it and tried to get quick 5,000 and it didn't work. And he just ended up stuck with it. Maybe because he had to pay taxes on it for a couple years and pay off liens. Maybe he just added like the money he wanted to make plus the money he spent. And that's
Mhm.
where he came up with his 2530. Because you can see here that it was removed February of 2021 after being listed for 564 days. So he got it for 10K. Doesn't really matter if somebody will actually buy it for whatever number that you'll make money on. The history of it doesn't really matter, but it does make you wonder, are
Right.
people going to go look at it? Because if you see here, it says seller will not provide a termite policy. Why would you say that? There must be termites there. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So because of all these different things, it really does make you scratch your head and say, hey, there probably is more work than meets the eye. Although there's a lot of work that meets the eye, there's clearly foundation, full exterior, full interior, roof, and it's a very small property where even the other comp was a couple hundred square feet bigger, which means a lot in this type of house. 1200 to 1230 to 1460, that's 230 square feet. That's a whole extra bedroom or like large bathroom or more living area. So just some things to look at, but also I do think that at 25 it's probably a deal. Let's see, let's look at this one real quick too. I know we're over because of the tech issues, but just bear with me because I think, are you guys understanding comping better right now with all this?
Yeah, so Toddy, not to throw you off, but basically what you're saying with the off market, don't get so caught up in the formula because I was doing what Lisa was doing. Don't get so caught up in the formula. You can look at what the cash buyers are paying
A
and
hundred.
as far as your comps, and you can kind of build in your assignment fee that way based off of those what similar properties have sold for.
100%. Because
Okay.
if you look at four flips, like four distressed properties that sold, and you see who bought them, number one, you're guaranteeing your deal because you already know who to sell it to. These are people who already bought similar properties right in that neighborhood, right? So when you go to them and say, hey, I see you bought 94, I have 94 Saunders Street, I have 98 Saunders Street, two doors down or right across the street, and I see you bought it for 50K. This one's for sale for 50K. Like there's not really negotiating. They're happy. Like we have a deal right now in Cleveland. The buyer has bought for 55,000. This deal I'm trying to sell him for 55,000. This one a little worse, he'll do 50. You know, there's not much. The deal's under contract for 40. So you have to get it low enough to sell it at their price or have some wiggle room. If they're buying it at 50, you want to get it at 40, 35 because you want to have enough room in case yours is a little worse. But when it's a full rehab, it's a full rehab. You see the comps. Now, where it gets tricky is when it's not a full rehab. The deals that we looked at so far, they're both full rehabs, interior, exterior. Where it gets tricky is when they're kind of as is and they're in that gray area where the seller feels like it's livable, but it's not renovated. So you're in this weird space where there's not a lot of flippers buying because the flippers are buying distressed properties for cheaper. Those are a little bit tougher, but still you can probably still find comps like we just found two as is comps in that area of Lisa's property. So you can probably still find as is comps. Sometimes it's just a little bit harder, but same thing. We're looking at similar condition. That's what matters the most. Similar beds, bathrooms, similar condition. We're not so much trying to go ARV times the formula times zero point
Okay.
0.7 minus repairs. That's flippers do that. Flippers are going to do that when they're getting a hard money loan, but that's more of if you can't find distressed comps, then you can go look at, okay, what's the thing with the thing with that though is you need to find real ARV comps. Like if Lisa would have done that to that 140, that wasn't an ARV comp. So now let's look at what that would have looked like based off of, let's say she thought that that was the ARV 140 and she went 70% minus, that's probably 60, 70,000 repairs. So let's minus 60. That brings her to, that kind of still worked. That brings her to around 38. So that did actually kind of still work because now you have to minus your assignment fee. So in that scenario, that did kind of work, but we weren't really able to find a real ARV comp. And the house she was looking at wasn't necessarily a comp either, but it did kind of work for that one. For yours, it was kind of tougher because there was no comps. There was no ARV. There was more new construction, and then there was one renovated duplex. So for yours,
Okay.
you wouldn't have been able to find it at all. So you have to go off cash comps.
All right.
Hers, honestly, I think it could be worth a little more if she was on that side of the highway because there was higher comps there than the 140. There was like 190s and stuff like that. So I think if she was on that side of the highway, but where we were at on this side of the highway, as far as cash comparables, the highest one, this was the new build looking one. The highest one was this 135. And this also, to me, this is not ARV. This is still like dated. So I kind of hate to go based off of these because they're kind of dated, but even if she did this 135 times 70% minus, then she would be around 34,000. And then she has to minus her assignment fee, so she'd want to make that offer around 24,000, which isn't, which also isn't crazy off. This is not like crazy off, so it kind of works out in this scenario as long as you're paying attention. Because if she thought 283 was ARV but didn't see that it was a new build, that could really throw you off. So there's ways it could be thrown off. But I would really only go to trying to do minus repairs if you can't find apples to apples cash comps. If you can, just try to keep it within that range. And don't try to find comps that justify the seller's price. Just go try to find the comps. Because if we're trying to justify the seller's price, we're going to ignore comps that we see that are, clearly a lot worse, especially when
So
they're distressed.
2 quick questions. So how many comps I need to move forward with it? Like, is it a general rule of thumb, like at least have 2 or at least have 3, or I can only have 1 maybe? Is my first question.
So yes and no. I mean, if you have a lot of comps, you want at least 2 or 3 of them to match your theory. Okay, this sold for 35, this sold for 40, this sold for 42. This is going to be my range of like distress. So I'm going to go try to lock it up for 25 because I can sell it to these buyers for their price that they already bought a house at. So yes, but also if there's not a lot of comps in that town, like Little Rock, there's a ton of comps, so she's fine. But let's say you're in like some random small town and there's not many comps. Now that's where it gets tough because you don't have enough to go off of. So it's really like you're trying to figure out the value of the neighborhood, which is when you go into Zillow, you're not worried too much about time now. You're trying to see like what are things selling at around here over time.
Okay.
What is the like if you have 2, that's good. But let's say you're in an area where this is the only messed up house and everything else that sold was kind of like as is. In that case, maybe then you'll go try to say, okay, these properties are selling for 150, but his is the worst, and it's in between this, and it probably needs 40,000. So let me take off the 40. Let me take off my assignment fee and do the 0.7 or 0.8. Now you can formula because there is no comp, so you have to take the best sales and work your way backwards.
That makes sense. And my other question would be, should I just try to stay away from on market altogether, or is on market fine?
I think if you're going to do on market, you have to have a strategy, which is
Okay.
either you're going on market, looking at stuff that's been sitting on market for 45 days and more, and you're
Mhm.
offering creative, and you're just trying to get low down payment creative deals, which is
Mhm.
definitely a strategy you could do. And you have to keep in mind how much work does this property need? Does it cash flow? Like if the seller wants 600 a month, is the rent 900 a month or more? Like people want to cash flow at least $400 or $500. They also have to put all the money into the property. So that's like some nuances with creative finance. Or if you're going on market, seeing what's been sitting on market and then just lowballing. You can't be anywhere near the sale price though. If it's on market for
Right.
150 and you get it for 135, that's not a deal. Like anybody could have went, anyone can go look at what's on market and offer 20, 30K less,
Right.
you want to be like where houses actually need to be at for a deal because it doesn't matter if it's on market if it's still a deal, but it has to really 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 be a deal. So like let's say you went and got that one for 60K, you will find a buyer for 65
Right.
70 all day,
Right.
whether it's on market or not. But the problem is, most of the time when it's on market and they're unrealistically high, they're not willing to come down that low, and that's why they're on market. Or they probably would have sold it as an investment to off market. Not saying that it's not worth it. I think the beauty of on market is if you can really like be an authority, the agent will send you other deals that are not on market. I think that's the real key
Okay.
to on market that a lot of people I don't think it's the houses that are on the market that are the deals. I think maybe 1 out of 40 or 50, yeah, you might luck up and they take a low ball and you're able to do a deal. But I think making that connection with that agent and saying, hey, this is what I'm looking for, send them to me before they go on market. Now you're making all these streams of off market agents. Where you will go wrong with that though is if you're making offers that you can't perform onto agents, you're not going to build a relationship because
Right.
they're just going to say this is the guy that doesn't perform. So
Right.
I'm not going to care. If you're honest and you say, "Hey, this deal won't work because we need to be at this because we're investors. This is our strategy." We would either need to renovate it, have a partner on the ground renovate it, and there's no room to do that, we'd be at 60. But for future deals, please keep us in mind. We'd love to look at things before they hit the market. Or if you have any other deals that would work as flips, we'd love to check them out. And then just leave the relationship there, text them a couple times a month, like, hey, do you have any deals? And that's how you get like inbound leads from agents, because that is a good strategy. It's just it's a strategy that takes time. It's a strategy that takes doing what you say you're going to do, and you need to really build your buyers list so that when they do send you something, you can perform. Because agents are savvier than sellers. They do this every day. If they feel like you're messing around, they're not going to really send you the deal anyway. But it's usually not a deal on market. I don't like doing on market at all because I'm paying people. Like if I'm paying VAs, I'm paying them to find deals. So kind of like I'm kind of wasting money if I'm paying people hourly to like go make a connection, right? Because agent outreach is more like connection making. But I don't think it's a bad strategy at all. I know people that make a lot of money doing just that. It's just their strategy is become friends with agents, get other deals sent to them. Maybe they do one on market, maybe they get the on market ones to be creative. That can work. So if you're going to do on market, I would say make the lowball offer, make a creative offer, let them know it's not for you, but you want other deals. And then let that be like your deal with every agent, put them in a pipeline in your CRM, text them every 2 weeks, and just leave it at that. Hey, do you have any other deals? We're still looking for a flip. And just make every text sound unique. Hey, how's it going? How have you been?
Right.
Just twice a month, like clockwork, because they're going to come up with deals throughout the year. And it works really
I,
well if you're in one market. But if you're nationwide virtual, you're going to be spread too thin.
uh, I think knowing what I know now, I definitely need to be off market primarily and just cast the net out there here and there for the on market, just for the relationship. That's kind of how I see me approaching it.
It's like how much time are you realistically putting into the business 5 days a week?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
So I have a job where I don't come on until 5, so I can pretty much do my outreach for 4, 5, maybe even 6 hours. So
So if
I can spend a good amount of time cold calling or text messaging.
So if you are, it would make sense to do 4 hours, and it has to be like a non-negotiable, like this is my schedule Monday through Friday. I do 4 hours of cold calling sellers, 2 hours of cold calling agents. You
Right.
got to
Yeah.
like split it up. And then when you start getting a lot of leads, 3 hours cold calling sellers, 1 hour cold calling agents, and 2 hours following up and making offers because now you have to put
Right.
in. But it has to be, you got to treat it like a 9 to 5 for it to pay you like that, and then you eventually leave because both strategies will work. But if you're going
Hmm.
to do outreach and look on market, make sure it's just in one market and make sure you have your buyers. The direct to seller strategy, you can do multiple markets. It's just as long as you get the deal low enough, you'll be able to sell it to a buyer, and that's pretty much the magic of it. There's not
Yeah.
really anything.
Quick, can I jump in real quick? I had a quick question.
Sorry.
Okay, hello?
Yes, go ahead. It's kind of breaking up. Say one more thing.
I was saying I had a quick question on that on market and how you was breaking down the on market
Okay,
part.
go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can hear. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. On that on market, and me and Hakeem, we talked yesterday a little bit about that. One of the things on the negotiating on the on market, because I'm not savvy. I don't really do the on market deals. But even the way the contract is structured, and I believe that I don't know if he answered or not, but I know he was going to ask you about it, the way the contract was structured, and them needing the earnest money they needed and all of that. And usually with a wholesale deal, you usually are writing the contract. Now, with them wanting the earnest money and the amount and all of that, I mean, it seems like that realtor still controls the deal for the most part. Is that right?
100%. Yeah. So technically the seller can sign any contract, but because there's an agent involved, they're going to use their, if you're in Texas, the track, if you're in Missouri, the Missouri. So like they're going to use their state contract. What the key is when you type in my company's Offer George LLC and or assigned, you can't type in just Offer George LLC because their contract is not going to have an assignment clause. It may even have a clause in there that says you can't assign unless you're going to double close. So that's the only two options. You either have to type in and or assign and be transparent that, hey, we're probably going to assign this to a holding company that's actually going to operate the deal, which is the truth. You're not going to close on it in this LLC, but this is how we do business. This is our process. We get under contract, we do our due diligence, we make sure, and then in title, we assign it to an LLC that's going to be the holding and the operating company. Also, being super transparent that you're working with a partner that's going to operate and renovate, because with agents, they're going to be all in the deal. They're going to be in title. They're going to be in everything. And you don't want them to get cold feet because they feel like you're not the buyer when people come walk the property, So transparency is huge. And the agent definitely does still control the deal. And the agent's job is to get the seller the most money. That's how they get paid, right? So that's another reason why I don't like agent outreach. But a lot of agents know what wholesaling is. They don't care if you have real cash buyers. Like we've had multiple agents that we did a deal with because the seller had an agent. They knew we were wholesaling. One of them even ended up joining our team for a few months. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just weird that like sometimes they don't care. They're just trying to make money. They understand the business. If you have a real buyer, they're fine with it. On the flip side, though, you also have those agents that hate wholesalers. They're trying
Right.
to pick apart every single thing. They want you to put the EMD down right away. And the biggest thing, that's not our process. Our process is we get the property under contract, we do our due diligence, and then we put down non-refundable earnest money. We don't want to put down, if we put down earnest money on every house that we looked at, we wouldn't have operating money, because if we're putting 5,000, 2,000 down on 10 houses a week, how are we going to operate our business? We want to look at the house first and make sure it's a good fit, and then we'll put down non-refundable earnest money, and we don't need that much time. Give us 5 days, 10 days, whatever you feel like. But if the house has been sitting on market for 85 days like this one, I don't think they're going to care about your due diligence period as much. But everything is harder with an agent. Your diligence period is tighter. Your earnest money is higher. It's especially if they're like a tough agent. But then there's super cool agents who are like, hey, they break all the rules, and they're like, hey, he'll really take 40K, and they tell on all the sellers of business, and that's a bad agent, but it works out for you. So agents are people. They want to make their money at the end of the day. And not all of them follow all the rules. So it just depends on who you land. But if you leave a good impression with them, they feel like you're serious and they feel like you're a buyer or that you really have buyers, they'll at least bring you deals besides the on market one. So I don't think it's a bad strategy. I just think it's a different strategy and you just have to approach it differently. There's people who that's their whole strategy. They just lock up 20 deals a month on market and they see which ones they can sell. And sometimes they burn bridges and sometimes they get away with it. And it's just like, for me, that's not my style, but I'm not going to knock anybody's hustle. I think transparency is key. And some people get caught in their lies and they ghost. I think it's just like, how do you want to do business? Do you want to like ruin your reputation in certain markets and you're always having to change markets? People like writing that you're a scam online. Like it's a lot that goes with this business, because even though it's a big country, the real estate world is small. Agents and investors work hand in hand. I think it's just all about how you approach the deal and transparency, honestly. I think every strategy works. It's just how are we choosing to do it?
100%. I feel like it is how you approach the deal. I tried to work with an agent before, and I think we almost got a property where I was trying to bring a buyer to the a property, but it was kind of more like they was trying to say, okay, all I know about is wholesalers is they make these big assignment fees, And I had to really explain to them what does it matter what I make on my end, long as you get what your seller want and you guys are happy. It shouldn't really matter, on that other end. And then other realtors who I work with, they was pretty much, they understood, as long as they was, like you said, if it was a house sitting for like 90 days or something like that, or 120 days, and you got a seller that's ready to back out, or he's getting frustrated and antsy, it may work for that matter. But I know I was talking to Hakeem, and I was just wondering how you would approach that deal, because we talked about it yesterday, and he said he was gonna talk to you about it a little more. So I just wanted to get a little insight on your strategy, your thought process with it. So
100% on that deal, I would just straight up say I could do 60K. It's way too much work. But if the seller would do something creative like 10K down, give us some time to fix it up, get it rented, and then we can start on some monthly payments and the seller be the bank on this. That's another way we could look at it. But I would not try to wholesale that deal if I had it at more than like maybe even 70. I could even try to go up to 70, but that's a tough one. This is a nice neighborhood, Lisa. So this is what I'm going to say. These are the ones where it gets tough because you have these nice neighborhoods where there's not a lot of comps. So this is actually the situation I was talking about. So we're on Lynch and Saunders here. I have to zoom out a little more so I can figure out where we are first. So so there's England, Broadway. That's weird. So 70. Okay, I'm going to use this as a landmark, this little twisty. So that's this. So to the bottom left of that, to the bottom left. So we've got the 440 and we've got this shape. Okay, so perfect. So we're in here, and then we're going to find Lynch Road, which looks like this main street here. And then we've got the small street is Saunders. So let's remove any. This is very interesting, and I don't know if this is, okay, let's turn this off. So here we've got a, do you know how many bedrooms it is, Lisa? Like two.
Let's see. Let me look in the folio to see.
These are nice houses.
Yeah, they want 280 for it. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath.
They want 280 for it? 180.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, they're just like way too high. That's okay. That's okay. Sometimes people are high on price because their house has sentimental value or whatever, but it's just not, it doesn't make sense. In that same neighborhood, this sold for 132. The thing about their house is they do have this like gigantic lot that nobody else has. I did notice that. But that doesn't really mean much unless you built another house there or something. But their house is very nice. It really is. And this is the type of house that should just get listed because this whole lot is theirs, I think. And like, you could really build another house right here. So I would just talk to them and say, hey, if you guys subdivided it, you could sell the lot and sell your house realistically. Like your house is probably worth 130, 150 by itself, but you have this giant lot. Or, have you thought about listing it? But this type of deal, I mean, they're like over 100K more than what is sold for on market. This is an on market sale. But their house is bigger and their house is nicer. But it's just they should list this because they want more than it's worth.
I was thinking the same thing. In fact, I have talked to a few potential sellers, and one lady, I just said it'd be best if you just renovate it yourself and get renters in there because their numbers are just so off. And then they're very firm on it, like very firm. And you can't tell them. I pulled comps, and I'm telling her with the comps, the address, everything. And she's like, oh no, we're not going under 100, but we really don't have to get rid of the property. And I said, maybe if you renovate it and you just sell it in a couple years. I said, because everything else has been on the market longer and they're decreasing the prices. So you're not going to get 100 grand for it. I said, but just do the renovations and I'll touch base with you, in another 6 months to see where you are, because she's just not getting that for the property.
Yeah, no, they're definitely not getting that. And that's why there's not really any comps, because their house is like significantly bigger. You can tell this is a nicer area and it's like a little bit more rural area of Little Rock, but at the end of the day, like it's not built up yet. Maybe once people start building a lot of new development around here, it will start to increase. But if they're not, and that's the thing, when somebody says, I don't really need to sell it, that's kind of like your key that it's not going to be a good deal. They're not going to give it to you at a good price because they're not really motivated. But that other property you have is a very distressed house that clearly they tried to sell it. I think today we saw some really good examples of like distress where they actually have a need. Akeem had the one that was distressed, but they clearly don't really have a need to sell. They own it outright and they are not in a rush for whatever reason. And then you have that one where the guy probably does really want to sell, but you're just not really able to contact with him. But I think these were good examples. The last one was kind of the only one that was hard to comp. I think we see the comps, we're aware of the comps. I think what's throwing us off is trying to focus more on the formula, and then we're getting lost in that. Even though it can work sometimes, it doesn't work sometimes. If we start with cash comps, if we start with looking at what are similar properties actually selling for, we can still do the formula to confirm it or not, but we'll just have a much clearer idea of what people are actually selling it for. Now we lock it up lower than that. I think, Lisa, even if, let's say the guy said he wouldn't go lower than 30 and you got it under contract, let's say you try to get 40 for it and you can't, you can still go back to him and say, hey, the foundation, my partners saw this and this and this, we really need it at 25. You can always go back and get a reduction based on what people find when they go there. If your only way to lock it up was 30, but since you already got him at 25, that's good. And then for Akeem, definitely want to be at like 60, 70, and then just make the connection with the agent so you can potentially do future deals. Always throw out creative on these ones that need a lot of work. It may be harder to find a buyer who wants to put that much work up cash, but I think we definitely have, I don't know, do you guys feel more comfortable with comping right now?
I feel a little better. I think it's just taking time and experience. I've been playing with Redfin and Zillow and PropStream. I find that PropStream in certain areas maybe work more than others because, you know, just my market, and that's just one market, and other markets I'm looking at, it's just a little more difficult. PropStream doesn't really help, but Redfin and Zillow does a better job.
Definitely, definitely. It's in non-disclosure markets, or even in some markets like Baltimore, like we were talking about. Sometimes Zillow's not the best, but then Redfin and Realtor are. But the more you look at them, and like what the strategy we did of finding the area and looking on Zillow, you can do that on Redfin, you can do that on Realtor. It's really just trying to look at the neighborhood itself and clicking around and seeing what things sold for and the condition they're in, because those websites typically have pictures. So if we can at least have prices and pictures, we can try to find comparables. And that's all comping is, comparables. If we can find comparables, see these things sold, we can also look at who bought those properties, and we have our potential buyers right there. And that's when we can be confident in our numbers and confident in our deal. If not, we're just kind of trying to lock it up and then see if we can find a buyer, which in the end is a huge waste of our most important resource, which is our time. So I just want you guys to be confident when you get them under contract that, hey, I know I have a buyer because X, Y, Z, and A company all bought properties for more than what I'm about to get it under contract for, and they're similar properties and similar condition. Now I feel confident. If you know that you're higher, you know that you're going to lock it up and then probably have to go for a price reduction, which isn't the worst thing. But if you can get it at the right price the first time, that's going to be the best bet. If they're distressed, it's a lot easier. When they're in the middle and they're like, the seller's convinced that it doesn't need that much work, that's when it's a little tougher to convince them that it does need a lot of work, but that's when you can go and say, hey, your property does still need a full update, which is around 40,000, 50,000, which is why we need to be at this price. And at the end of the day, if they're not that motivated or they can't sell it at that price, the best we can do is offer creative or say, hey, are you open to something creative maybe? Or we're just not a good fit, but keep me in mind if this doesn't work out, and then follow up, because most deals aren't going to be deals the first couple times you talk. And with yours, Lisa, like you see, sometimes it's hard to get back with sellers even once you agree. And that's kind of why the follow up sometimes, there's so many follow-ups before the contract. But I have a good feeling that this will be your first contract and deal. And just good job for being diligent, because you've been on this for the past few weeks. And I think the time is now.
I agree, from your mouth to God's ears, and many more. Because I've been pulling my hair out trying to do these comps. I'm just like, gotta make it make sense. So I look at the year build, I look at the square footage. What is the square footage? No, the year built can be 10 up or 10 down or something. I don't know. I'm just trying, I guess, because
Even 20, but again, like don't get so caught up in that, because even if the beds and baths and all that aren't perfect, when someone comes, if it's in distress like that one, when someone comes in and tears everything down and starts over, they can put another bedroom, they can add another half bathroom. You know, the flipper will figure that out. We just want to see what our distressed properties selling for, and as long as they're not a huge difference, like 1940s and 1960s, it's not going to be a big deal if it's not 10, if it's more than 10 years, you know? But if we're talking about 2010 and 2020, 2010, 2025, that's a big difference. That's the 10-year difference that matters more. But if we're in the 1900s, it's really not going to make that big of a difference. It's going to be a full rehab no matter what if it hasn't been updated.
right. And something really quick, I know we've been on really late. I'm finding, like, even when I pull the list, the skip trace list, I'm finding that some of these people, if it's they have to sell, they don't want to sell, and they're unrealistic. I mean, I know it's the nature of the business and you just have to keep going and it's all about the numbers, but it's like they're unrealistic about the property. I mean, that's anyone, even if it's not a distressed property or it's not a probate or a trust, and they want more money, then they argue you down. And then on top of that, I'm thinking, like, you're going to lose this property. Oh, I've been getting calls all day. And it's, I don't know if just the mindset is just a little, especially when they need to sell it. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
think people hold that mindset until they get the reality check.
right.
There's a couple things though. There are different types of buyers. We had a deal that we couldn't sell for 3 months. It was on the market. We bought a distressed house. People were like doing crack in it. We had to kick people out, homeless people out 3 times. Nobody wanted to buy it. Finally, there was this Mexican family that does all the work themselves. They bought the materials. They went in there and fixed it with their own hands. A house that would be a $70,000-$80,000 rehab for a flipper cost them 20, 30 in material, and they went and did it themselves. So we also have to keep in mind that there may be some local person there that will buy it for their price. All we can do is educate them on the comps that have sold, educate them on our business model. This is how we buy houses, and this is why this won't work for us. And then just follow up. You know, it's not our job to convince people. It's just our job to offer the solution we can offer them, and then do our job and keep following up. But they may find a buyer. Like there's been deals where I said, no way anyone's going to buy that. And someone did buy it. Maybe they got stuck with it and couldn't sell it. There's also less savvy people who buy bad deals, you know? So sometimes we think, no way anyone's going to buy this. They might be crazy. They might lose the house, but they might not. But we follow up, because if they don't sell it to anyone else, they probably will end up accepting ours. All the time this happens, all the time. We had a guy who wanted 200,000. He ended up getting under contract with us for 110 after 6 months of follow up. And it happens all the time, and it ended up being a $55,000 deal. So it happens all the time. It's just, how long are we willing to keep following up? And Daryl also, I don't like prop wire comps. They don't have all the comps. I'll say that. Like they have some, like they can be good, but they don't have them all. You're really better off looking on Zillow and PropStream. But even without PropStream, Zillow actually has all the comps. Sometimes they're just non-disclosure states, so it's hard to see the price, which is when PropStream comes in handy. PropWire, they just don't have them all. That's the thing. Like if you can find some on there, that's good. But when I've tried to comp, I see so many more on PropStream that aren't on PropWire yet. But I do think that it's getting better. Like as time goes on, they're working on it more and it gets better and better. I think soon PropWire will be just as good as all of them. But Zillow is the like king of real estate right now. They have everything. So you don't really need to pay for a prop stream or a prop wire or anything if you're not in a non-disclosure state. If you are, then having another tool helps. But yeah, PropWire is just not there yet. Not there yet, but they will be. There's another one called homes.com too. I mentioned that. They're trying to be the next Zillow too. So I think over time they will also get better and better. So my note taker is in here, but while I try to get the link, it's not working. So once we end this later on tonight, I'll have this in the school. I know this was a long one, but the good thing about Fathom, you can just look at the transcript and go to the part that you want to hear again. It breaks it down really easily. So go back over this, practice the comps alongside, especially if you're having trouble comping. Go look in your CRM and look at deals that you're looking at right now. And go on Zillow and look in the area, look in PropStream, and try to find comparables physically, beds, bath, square foot, but don't get too fixated on every tiny detail. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just look at condition. What did it sell for? What do I think mine can sell for in comparison? Now, mine's a 2-bedroom. This is a 3-bedroom, but this sold for this much. Maybe I'll get a little less. And just start running scenarios so you can get ranges. Okay, I need to be between 25 and 30. And go out and offer those solutions. Not make offers, but offer those solutions to sellers, educate them. And I think as long as you stick to that, comping won't be hard. It's always going to be a challenge until you get really comfortable with it. But at least you'll have confidence knowing, hey, if they accept anything in this range, I can sell this deal. And that's where we want to be. We want to know we can sell it before we get it under contract. So we're not wasting our time. We're not wasting their time. And when we go look for buyers, we're not wasting buyers' time. But thank you all for being here.